Meatloaf is quite possibly my favorite comfort food, and probably yours too. This version uses dark meat turkey instead of beef, so it's still packed with flavor, but it's much healthier and equally as delicious. The secret weapon in this recipe is Chipotle's and adobo sauce. It gives it a little bit of a southwestern flair. Start with your meat in the bowl. I have 2¼ pounds here of turkey ground. Make sure it's the dark meat, more flavor, and 2 slices of white bread. This is just your good old sandwich bread. You don't need anything fancy here. In fact, the soft white bread is really ideal because it absorbs all of those flavors and bakes up really well with your meat mixture. And to that, salt, 1½ teaspoons, kosher salt, coarse, always, and 1/2. And Worcestershire, this is very common in meatloafs and hamburgers. It imparts a lot of flavor. You'll need 2 teaspoons here. You can just sort of drizzle it over the mixture because we're going to mix it all up anyway. And pepper, 1/2 teaspoon, freshly ground, always. You could grind this into a bowl and measure it, but I just like to use my eyeballs. Okay, that looks good. And the adobo sauce, 2 teaspoons. A chipotle is just a dried and smoked jalapeno pepper. So it gives a similar level of heat, but with a nice earthy smokiness. And you'll find that you never need an entire can of this good stuff at once. So transfer it to a Tupperware and it'll keep in your fridge for a very long time. And an onion. I like to use red onion. You could also use a sweet onion or a white onion. 3/4 cup is all you need here. Minced. And the mince is nice and fine. So take your time. The other way. If you're mincing your onions with a sharp knife, you won't have any tears, I promise you. Okay, I think that looks like just about 3/4 cup. So that goes in, and you have to have a binder for your meatloaf, of course. An egg does the trick quite well. Give it a quick whisk. And then, an unusual herb for a meatloaf perhaps, but it really works nicely with the chipotles in adobo, and that's cilantro. This is gorgeous cilantro I have here. Still on the roots. If you see herbs on the roots, I'm telling you, that is the way to buy it. And these roots, get them nice and clean, and you can chop them up and saute them with your onions or garlic in a recipe. It imparts excellent coriander flavor. And the stems are tender and perfectly edible too, so you can chop those right up with the leaves, not like parsley or sage or some of those other herbs where you have to remove the stems because they're too tough. These are tender and delicious. A casual chop, you don't have to go too fine here. Does it look like about 1/2 cup to you? Might be a little more, but I like cilantro, so in it goes, all of it. And fold this up. Now a little trick, if you have an Italian grandmother that taught you how to make meatballs, you probably already know this, but you don't want to overwork the ground meat because it can become tough. So just use a gentle folding motion. You could also get in there with your hands. Really, we just want to make sure that all of those flavors are evenly distributed. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. This just goes into a loaf pan. This is a 9x5. If you have a non-stick, you could use that, but you can also just spray a regular loaf pan with non-stick cooking spray. Transfer the mixture into your pan. And now this is almost ready for the oven, but we have one more step to do. The glaze that goes on top. The glaze makes the meatloaf. 2 ingredients are all you need for the glaze. 1/2 cup of ketchup. Surely you have a jar of this in your fridge. America's favorite condiment, as I like to call it. And the chipotles from that can of chipotles in adobo. This is 2 teaspoons minced. That'll be about 1 of those little peppers in there. And just stir that about. And all of this glaze goes right over the top. Just the smell of the ketchup and chipotles together is pretty convincing that this is going to be a delicious meatloaf. And you can use a brush if you'd like to just evenly distribute the glaze. It'll become hot and bubbly and sort of melt down into the sides. This just goes into a preheated 375-degree oven for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. You want the meatloaf to register 160 degrees on a thermometer. That's important because, remember, this is turkey and not beef, so it can't be under. And then alongside it, roast sweet potatoes. They'll finish up in about the same amount of time. Then you'll have a delicious sweet potato mash that pairs beautifully with this turkey meatloaf and those flavors of chipotle and cilantro. Now, the reason you fork these sweet potatoes is that if you don't, they could explode in your oven, and nobody wants that. And I love these kinds of dinners where you can do everything together at once. They start together and finish together, just the way it should be. Makes your life a lot easier. Okay, into the oven. Our meatloaf is out of the oven, looking gorgeous, and it's still hot, but do let it set up for a good 10 to 15 minutes before you slice it. Some lime wedges. The sweet potatoes, you can see, have been mashed. I just mashed them up with olive oil, salt, and pepper. And the meatloaf you can just cut into slices as you desire. I'm hungry, so I'm gonna do nice, thick slices here. This is definitely enough to feed 6 people, I would think. This is a really easy meal to pull together on a weeknight. Some of that sweet potato mash onto the plate. A beautiful slice. Ooh, I want this one, right from the center. Resting on the mash. And then I have this beautiful cress here. This is called upland cress, but watercress would work well too. It's a nice, tender, peppery green. Upland cress is sold as a living green. It's still got its roots at the bottom. And a drizzle of oil, a little bit onto your meatloaf and your mash. And then to finish it all, a squeeze of lime juice. And there you have it. A beautiful and delicious anytime meal. Happy eating.